Welcome to the program, General Dominique Trinquand.
Good morning. Thank you.
President of France, Emmanuel Macron, did not exclude sending ground troops to Ukraine. Do you personally take his statements on ground troops for Ukraine seriously?
What I take seriously is the correct answer from the president. The president said no option should be excluded. And when a journalist asked him, do you think that troops on the ground are part of the option? He replied that yes, it's an option. That doesn't mean that it's an option which will work. It just means that no option could be avoided. It's a typical military position where when you are with an opposition force, you need to study all the options. That doesn't mean that France will send troops to fight in Donbass, but that means that France is free to send military personnel in Ukraine to help Ukrainian forces.
From your perspective, why did President Macron change his rhetoric towards the war in Ukraine?
I think that initially, President Macron wanted to avoid the war. That's why he was speaking to President Putin. Then he changed his position in support of Ukraine completely because it was impossible to discuss with President Putin. And now, because the situation is tense on the ground between Ukrainian forces and Russian forces, and because the election in the US in November, next November, is uncertain, meaning that if President Trump, Mr. Trump is elected, there will be probably a change of position of the US. So President Macron thinks that it is time to show to President Putin that there is a strong support in Europe, and France is taking the lead on that subject. Strong support for Ukraine in every matters dealing with the fight against Russia.
I would like also to cover the military affairs and military position of France. Does the French army have enough capabilities to dramatically change situation on the ground if it is deployed to Ukraine?
No, first thing, I just come back to my first answer. Don't imagine that there will be French forces fighting with Ukrainian forces against Russian forces. What the president is saying that no option should be avoided, but up to now, President Zelensky himself said that he doesn't need French troops to fight in Donbass. That means that the support will be either to support forces and equipment which are provided by the French forces, to help in any sense asked by the Ukrainian, because at the end, it's Ukraine which is in charge of the defense of Ukraine, and what they are asking will study that, will not oppose any option, will study all the options. That's the first reply I'm making. Secondly, concerning French forces in Europe, just taking in mind that France is increasing its budget since 2016. So it's not only after the attack of the Russians in Ukraine. France has increased its budget for at least 7 years now. Secondly, French forces are the only forces in Europe which has the nuclear power, independent nuclear power. Secondly, French forces are the only one in Europe to have a fighting experience, mainly in Africa, certainly, but a fighting experience. And thirdly, the French forces currently are the first forces, military forces in Europe, before Germany and before Poland, even if Poland is making a huge increase currently. That's why France have a specific position in Europe and can be very helpful. The only problem we've got in France is that because we are employing our forces, we don't have stocks, like, for example, in Germany or Poland, who used to have stocks of weapon system, which were previously Soviets one. In France, of course, we don't have that. So we are in a bit of difficulty to provide stocks. That's why we provided, for example, in archery, our own archery regiment have been sending their guns to the Ukrainian forces.
According to the French media, President of France, Emmanuel Macron, said that he could deploy troops in case of Russia's advances to Odessa or Kiev. What do you think about this statement, and won't it be too late to do so in such a case?
First thing, I don't think that the Russians are able to do that for several reasons. They have tried initially to go to Odessa. They were stopped at Nikolaev and never able to go forward. They were even obliged to withdraw on the east side of the Dnipro. So I think they're not able currently to cross the Dnipro and attack in the direction of Odessa. But Odessa is strategic for Ukraine. That's why probably in terms of air defense, some help could be provided to Ukrainian forces in Odessa. As you know, Moldavia is not very far. There's a threat with Transnistria on Moldavia. That's why European Union decided to provide air defense system to Moldavia. And this air defense system could be increased to go to Odessa. That's the first bit. Going to Kiev, I don't think that the Russian forces are able to go to Kiev. And the Ukrainian forces, helped by European defense system, are in a position to defend themselves in Donbass.
Le Monde reported that French President Emmanuel Macron said that he would be forced, he should send ground troops to Ukraine, especially to Odessa, within the next year. Why is there such a timeline, and why exactly to Odessa?
The Elysee Palace said that this quotation was wrong. It was not a quotation from the president. So I don't know exactly the subject. But what I can say is that Odessa is strategic for Ukraine, that because of the ability of Ukrainian forces to destroy part of the Russian fleet in the Black Sea, Odessa is still working. But probably a air defense system could be added. And that's probably what is one of the options which is on the table.
Could the Ukrainian forces be provided with additional air defense systems, or could French troops deploy air defense system by themselves, for example, in Odessa?
I don't know if French troops will deploy air defense system directly with their own crews, French crews, or will be provided to the Ukrainian forces. The Ukrainian forces are have got a very good ability to use the French system, either Mambas, Crotal, or SATCP, and they are currently doing that. So they can do that also in Odessa. But we'll see what will be the pressure and what of the Russian forces, and what will be the needed asked by the Ukrainian government. France will provide only what is needed by the Ukrainian government.
What do you expect from the situation on the ground in Ukraine in the next weeks and months ahead?
I think that in the next month, Ukrainian forces should establish in a defensive position. And I guess that's what they are doing. They are not capable currently of an offensive. On the Russian forces, they are increasing the pressure, but the pressure they are increasing is just able to take a few meters per day. And the aim of President Putin is probably to conquer the rest of Luhansk and Donetsk oblasts, because he have already decided that they are a part of Russia. But I don't think that the Russian forces are able to do more than that. The current situation in Russia is very important after the election. It will change drastically the way of the power of President Putin is oppressing the people in Russia. And I think that this will be the big change in the next month. Small advantage on the ground against Ukraine, but big advantage in Russia to oppress the people in Russia.
Do you expect President Putin to announce the full-scale mobilization?
I don't think a full-scale mobilization, but a mobilization certainly. You will be in a position to do that after the election, and because they have lost a lot of soldiers on the ground.
I would like also to cover President Macron's policy. His recent statements have raised a kind of skepticism in other European capitals. For example, in Berlin, some European officials say that President Macron's words does not necessarily match his real actions in support for Ukraine. Do you agree with such a position?
I don't agree at all. I mean, we need to stop this sort of competition with providing the more equipment. I told you that all Eastern countries in European Union, and Germany did have stocks of former Soviet equipment. France doesn't have this sort of equipment. So that's why initially there were lots of equipment provided by these armies. Also, these armies were very small because they disbanded a lot of regiments. So they did have stocks, including in UK, for example. France doesn't have stocks because its army is still an army which is employing its equipment. So that's the first piece on the equipment. The second point is the approval of the position of President Macron by other countries. After 2 weeks, you have seen that after the Elysee meeting, Poland, Baltic states, but also Czech Republic approved the position of President Macron. And he was in Berlin on Friday with the Prime Minister of Poland to try to discuss with the Chancellor of Germany. There is a very different position in Germany. Germany, since the Second World War, have been convinced to be a Pacific country. And so it's very difficult inside the society to change this mind. I've been 5 years position in Germany, so I know a bit the country. So this needs time. In France, it's a bit different. Even if we've got to convince people that war in Ukraine is directly involving France, because we are far away from Ukraine. And Spain and Italy are in the same position. So we've got to convince people that the war in Ukraine is also the war of all European countries. It needs time. In France, we have the benefit of our constitution, where the president can be a leading politician, saying that war in Ukraine is war in France, and afterwards go to the parliament. In other countries, it is not the case. The prime minister should go first to the parliament before speaking. That's why it's taken a bit time.
Can President of France deploy ground troops without the permission from the parliament independently?
Yes. Yes. This is a decision in the end. He is the head, is the commander-in-chief of the army, and he decide and go to the parliament afterwards just to have the approval from the parliament after the deployment, meaning that there will be a support in the country for this deployment. But France have been deployed troops in Africa without the agreement of the parliament initially.
Does France plan to increase its domestic production of ammunition and weapons?
Yes, of course, this started last year. The problem is that in Europe, all countries thought that there was no war possible in Europe. So there was weapons were provided mainly for export and not mainly for European countries. So in terms of ammunition, for example, we have tripled the production of shells, for example, 155 shells. We have doubled the production of guns for the Caesar artillery guns, for example, and we are doubling also the production of air defense system. But it takes time, and I think that in 2024 and 2025 will improve drastically this production, not only in France, but in all European countries.
President of France, Emmanuel Macron, is planning to visit Ukraine in the nearest future. What can do President of France in order to even support Ukraine more and to help Ukraine's war effort?
I think the effort is first, of course, a defense effort with equipment. A lot of French companies have been in Ukraine in order to be prepared to produce in Ukraine equipment. So that's the first bit. But I think the second bit is the political matter. The fact that France is taking the lead in the support of Ukraine, showing to everyone that no option should be excluded. Everything should be worked out in order to fulfill the request by the Ukrainian government. And the visit in Ukraine, in Kiev or elsewhere, by President Macron should be useful. It should not be only a touristic visit, but something which provide more help to Ukraine. And this is what it is worked out now.
Does that mean that President Macron is preparing to lead support for Ukraine, even in case of the absence of the United States?
That means that we don't know what will happen in November. And Europeans should think ahead that if the Americans are electing President Trump, things will change. And so they must be prepared to support Ukraine without the US. It's just a preparation. That doesn't mean that it will happen, but we will not wait until November to be prepared. We need to be prepared now. And President Macron wants to show to all the countries that they need to be prepared now. But it is also a domestic problem. You know that we've got election in Europe in June, and the French should show that they are supporting European Union policy in Ukraine, and that then vote not for the far right or the far left, but for the center in France.
From your perspective, could France also provide Ukraine with additional anti-aircraft systems and with more long-range Scalp missiles?
France is already providing a lot of Scalps system. In air defense system, France will probably provide more air defense system. The problem is that it is very complex system and it needs time to produce them. France have not many of this system. It provide already one complete system, Mambas, to Crotal system and some SATCP to Ukraine, but also in Romania, close to Moldova, at the back of Ukraine. As you know, France is providing the NATO forces there. So France will be utmost to provide that to Ukraine, but it takes time. I'm sorry to say that.
Also, Ukrainian pilots are studying how to use US-made F-16 jets, and Ukraine should receive first F-16s this summer. Is France ready to also provide Ukraine with its own French-made fighter jets?
We've got two problems there. The training of the pilots. Some of these pilots are trained in France, as you know. So we are already participating. We don't have F-16, so we can't provide F-16. We have only Mirage 2000. The problem is that when you are providing different type of system, you need to have the whole system together. So, for example, for tanks, Leopard is a good solution because you are providing the same type of system to Ukraine. In aircraft, F-16 is the good choice. Will we be able to provide Mirage 2000? And will Ukraine need this system? I don't know. But France is certainly training pilots first, and secondly, studying what type of aircraft is needed by Ukraine.
I would like also to cover the public support for Ukraine in France. How could you assess the level of public support to continue aiding Ukraine among the French people?
It's really a fight inside our society. You've got what we call the right, far right, Rassemblement National, for example, which is saying that is supporting Ukraine, but at the same time saying that we need to negotiate now, which is partly a defeat for Ukraine. So it's, they are cheating a bit. On the far left, it's far more difficult, where they are saying we don't have to support the war more than that. We need to negotiate now. So we need to convince our citizens that fighting in Ukraine is fighting for Europe and for France. And there is a lot of work to do on that. I'm doing that in media every day. I'm doing that. Yesterday, I was in a meeting where suddenly I saw that things are changing in France. French people don't want to go at war. This war is far from their border. They've got problems inside France. And shall I say that the French people are spoiled people? They are rich people in peace, and they don't realize that to defend our liberty, the way we are living need an effort. And we need to convince that, and that's what we are doing, preparing the European election in June.
So you think that the public opinion in France is shifting towards more support for Ukraine?
I think so. I think that more or less smallly, but yes, there is a shift in this position. We need to communicate, to explain, and to be very careful about for example, for nuclear power. The fact that the Russians are talking about nuclear power. What I'm saying is what Saint Pope John Paul II said. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. In France, we are secure by our nuclear power. So the Russian will never dare to fight against France. Be sure that we'll be powerful enough to help Ukraine to fight against the Russian.
Do you feel that France is ready to use even nuclear power in case of the threats, real threats from the Russian side?
The real threat on the Russian would be a threat against Europe, against France and against Europe. If Europe is attacked, France is attacked. And I think that Russian will never use that. First, because the doctrine of the Russian forces is to use in second if Russian is vital interests are attacked, which is not the case currently. So Russian will not use its nuclear power. It's just a threat. It is not a use of weapons.
And what does the public opinion in France say about possible ground deployment to Ukraine in the future even?
Currently, the French citizens are not agreeing to a deployment to fight into Donbass. They will accept some military personnel to help some in another matter, but they are not ready to accept people fighting in Donbass. If there is a dramatic change in Ukraine, which I don't believe, that Ukrainian forces, for example, will try to take Odessa or Kiev, it will probably push a change in the position of the French citizen. But currently it's not the case. But because, of course, I think that Russia is not in a position to do that.
Thank you, General, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
Glory to Ukraine. Thank you.
Героям слава. Thank you very much.